My name is Adam Eli, and I'm an author and community organizer. And this is Julie Cohen, the director of the film.
Thank you.
Just want to start off by saying thank you to everyone in the theater for pulling together as a community and sticking it out. That is what the movie is all about. So I'm going to ask Julie a few questions. Well, first I'll tell you a little bit about how I relate to the movie, and then I'll ask Julie a few questions, and then we'll take one or two questions from the audience. I am really, as an organizer, I'm really passionate about the intersex movement. I went into a panel about intersex rights, and I had no idea, and I left with a group of friends and I with our jaws on the floor, and ever since then, the fight to end intersex surgery and bodily autonomy, and queer bodily autonomy has been super important to me. I know Saifa, Alicia, and River. I know them all super well, not to brag, but also not to brag, I'm in the movie. I'm wearing a pink kippah. Yeah, I was the organizer behind the protest in the rain, and I was also a speaker at the other one. So I'm like really, really passionate about the movie and the cause. So I came into the movie being like, these three people are my friends. I know all about this movie. Like, I'm just here to support. But I learned so much, especially about David, which I didn't know anything about. And so the first question that I want to ask you is if you could talk a little bit about how the film originated. I know the answer to this question, but it's a really good answer. So I'm just going to sort of ask it anyway. You know what I mean? Did you set out to make a movie about the intersex rights movement?
I definitely did not set out to make a movie about the intersex rights movement. While I actually was aware of intersex people and what that means, I didn't know at all what was going on with the intersex rights movement. The origin of this film, actually NBC News, where I worked as a producer for a long time, quite a long time ago, invited me back in 2018 for a few months, basically to look through their archives for stories that might make good jumping off points for feature docs. And I immediately gravitated to the David Reimer Dr. Money story, which I acknowledge I did not work on at all, but I had not only seen, I actually read the script. I remember reading it in a script file and saying like, wow, this is incredible, that my colleagues, Keith Morrison and Ruth Chenetz had done. And so when NBC invited me back, that was kind of my first thing, was to dig into that story. And I actually watched all the field tapes, and meaning, not just what was on the air ultimately, but everything that had been filmed for the story. And in the incredibly emotional David Reimer interview, he mentioned a soundbite which we basically use in the film, where he explained that the reason that he was coming forward and showing his face publicly and telling this, painful story was because he understood that the misrepresentation of his own medical history was being used to harm intersex people for decades, that followed, and he didn't like it. Of course, I was watching this in the context of understanding already that he had taken his own life, so it made it like kind of all the stronger, and that kind of set me into a course of looking into, wow, what's going on with the intersex rights today. I actually think I Googled intersex activists, and what came up was a lot of footage of Alicia on social media kind of out there. So I reached out to her right away, and she connected me to Saifa. River kind of walked on to a shoot. Actually, the moment that I met River is in the film. It's when they walk into the group of people making posters and sits down and starts making a poster, and I'm like, wow, who's this? Like, this person is amazing. And I did not know they were an actor at that point, but so that's kind of how the three came together.
Wow. I didn't know that part about River either. And so this film has been released by Focus Features. Shout out. Thank you. It has screened. It is on streaming on Peacock. Tell your friends. It's even on American Airlines. And so I have personally experienced some reactions to this. The person next to me at the Tribeca premiere stood up and left and then came back crying. I spoke with a security guard that was crying at Tribeca. What has the reaction been like, especially with this wide audience?
Yeah, I definitely have gotten reactions to this film kind of beyond things that I've worked on in the past, because of I think, not just the personal nature, but River's great words from the beginning of the film, like kind of the zero-ness of intersex representation. So that sort of led to, with the beauty really of social media, so much of the intersex community became aware of the film pretty organically, as you remember, because you were at the Tribeca premiere. It was kind of amazing while myself and the stars were taking our pictures on the red carpet before, like just like a big group of intersex people like started showing up. So we invited them to come onto the red carpet too. And it just really felt like such a moment and that has kind of continued. I certainly have heard directly from a lot of intersex people, a lot of parents of intersex people, myself and Alicia and Shauna Knizhnik, who was our consulting producer on this film, who is intersex herself, and who I actually know because she was an interview subject in RBG, the film I directed with my frequent partner Betsy West. We spoke together at the annual national conference of Interconnect, which is an intersex support group. So and screened the film there, which was just, I think the film shows all of the painful portrayals and lack of portrayals that people have become accustomed to, and to set that, the huge contrast of seeing River, Alicia, and Saifa presented in a very different, more affirming way seemed to, really have an impact on people. And certainly it's been great to hear from a lot of individuals. I've actually had three maybe friends and former colleagues who've come out to me as intersex, or as being the parent or grandparent in one case of an intersex person. So any doubts that I had about the point that the film makes that intersex people are here have now vanished.
Yeah, absolutely. And you mentioned the historical moment, and it really was a historical moment at Tribeca on the red carpet. There's this, I don't know if there are any queer film buffs here, but there was this moment where Lena Bloom walked the red carpet at Cannes, and she was the first Black trans woman to have like a major role in a film, and she was like posing on the red carpet and like whatever. It sort of felt like that to me. And Alicia and I were talking to some press, and we felt like the press weren't getting it. We were like, this is the first time that this has happened ever. And I truly believe that this film will be an iconic, historic, queer documentary, the likes of Paris is Burning. I think that this will stand the test of time. So really bravo, Julie. And
Thank you.
as it pertains to your work, I feel like this is a little bit different than your work. Sort of the Julie Cohen brand is more of like a portrait of an iconic woman, like RGB. Can you tell us about how this film does or doesn't relate to more of what you're known for in the documentary space?
Yeah, in some ways, I think stylistically, the fact that it's about not just one individual, and in certain stylistic ways, it differs. But I would say, since I went into making docs about 15 years ago, one thing I try to bring into my work is kind of like a lovingness. I think there can be fantastic documentaries that are not loving at all. I don't want to say that like a documentary must be loving. Some of my favorite docs are quite unloving, but I got into doc world after news world as not a kid anymore. And I speak with some like intensity or whatever because I'm heading to 60 in a few weeks, so that's kind of freaky. But I just feel like you get to a stage where like when you're making a documentary, you like pour yourself into into the midst of the subject matter so deeply, and I kind of just want to make films that have a lot of love in them, and I think that is true of a lot of films that I've worked on, and I think it's true here. And kind of like lovingness was what I was trying to, I think, kind of draw out of this story.
I think that love definitely came through. And speaking with folks in the intersex community, I think, or I know that they really felt that love too. It's been really, really embraced by the community. And so my last question for you before we turn it over to the audience is, what do you want people to take away from the film? And are there any, direct calls to action? Because this is a movement-related film.
Yeah, well, I certainly want people to come out of the theater feeling the love. And I think in a way that hopefully goes beyond just the intersex issue. I love the moment where River talks about giving their mom grace. I just feel like that was such a poignant, incredible, kind of unexpected moment, that soundbite, and I just like walking away with that feeling is great. I think also, though, just like wanting to learn more is good. The intersex issue is extremely complex. This film is so not a comprehensive. This does not tell you everything you need to know about intersex. So I hope it leads people to want to read, to want to engage. And a great place to do that is with an organization called Interact, which is kind of the main advocacy group for on intersex issues. And we were really fortunate at Tribeca that a group called Subject Matter gave us a grant to do some engagement stuff that went both engagement for the film and also was a contribution to Interact. And anyone that wants to learn more about that can go to subjectmatter.org/interact. And that'll give you more information, also how you can give to Interact and some of the work they're doing there. The intersex rights movement is really in the midst of a big blossoming moment. This film, I hope, helps that. I think it's part of that, but it in no way started it. It's the intersex activists themselves that have made that happen. And, the great thing about being a filmmaker and working with a high-profile entity like Focus and NBC News Studios is that we really are in a position to kind of amplify amazing things that are going on. So just sort of paying attention. And the one thing that intersex activists have told me when I ask, like, oh, what can people do? The number one thing they could do is just talk about it. If someone says, oh, what's intersex? Is that trans? Saifa in particular has said to me, like, I would so much appreciate you just explaining it to people when you see them, when you're having dinner. Like, they get tired of having to explain the details of their bodies over and over. Now the film kind of can do that for them. And so can audiences. Just like explain intersex. It's a thing. Like this is what it is. It's not something to be horrified by. It's just like a variation of the human body. Like, if we weren't so ashamed of all bodily things in general, probably that wouldn't happen. There would be less of an ignorance and prejudice about intersex people.
Yeah, and before we go to the questions in the audience, I just want to say something. When you were talking about how you think that the intersex movement is blossoming in this moment and you hope the film's part of it, I can say for sure that it is having a moment and that this film is a part of it. There have, in my being a part of and studying the intersex movement, there are a few historic moments. You saw one of the historic moments when everyone is sitting in the park. There's another historic moment, the first protest outside of the urological conference. And a huge moment was when Hannah Gabi, the model, came out as intersex. And another one is, I would say this summer, when this film and two memoirs, one by Alicia and one by Pigeon, who you met in the film, came out all within the same 3 weeks. And so this has been a huge... Alicia was on NPR and Time Magazine. I think you were in the New York Times twice in a week or something. So it was a huge, huge moment for something that's been kept so silent, as you saw. And I don't know, you all just witnessed intersex and queer history. So let's take one or two questions. We have time for that. Who am I looking at?
Beautiful film. Thank you so very much. I can definitely also see this as a great educational tool. Are you using like maybe a shorter version, or do you have any kind of like those kind of impact campaigns that you're doing to help educate in a more like, I guess, private setting than?
Yeah, I mean, that is happening all around. There's what's called the non-theatrical distributor, which is called Swank, through which you can through which organizations can get the film and show it and do. We've actually had all kinds of different, LGBT centers around the country, but also the U.S. State Department had a screening. I'm going up to do a screening at Harvard Medical School in 2 weeks by their invitation. Like embassies, just like various places have reached out, and obviously we want to see way more of that. I mean, particularly with medical students, seems like it should be a really amazing and perhaps intense experience.
Okay, so we have time for one or two more questions. Anyone?
Thanks for the very consequential film. Whatever became of Dr. Money? Did he sort of sail off into the sunset, oblivious of what he'd created, or do you know much more about him?
No. So, first of all, he has passed away at this point some time ago. He had not passed away 25 years ago when Dateline did their story, but wouldn't talk to them. We did find, as part of our research for this film, in Johns Hopkins, there are, when his studies were debunked, for whatever reason, the debunking just didn't spread as widely as the original bunking. But when in the period in the late 90s, when his studies were debunked, and when that got a fair amount of attention, like including by the Rolling Stone reporter John Colapinto, who then wrote a book about the case, and it's the late 90s. The story is getting debunked. Johns Hopkins the school and their departments, actually some of the main voices that spoke out against Dr. Money were within Johns Hopkins also, and they kind of teach against him. But we did see some of their PR records in which they seemed concerned, I would say, but never quite didn't. He sort of got sidelined a little. He did not lose his job, but they sort of were tamping him down. He personally was completely outraged by the criticisms of him, wanted the university to fight back aggressively, which they did not do, but they did not dismiss him.
I'm going to jump in there also and say something that maybe the filmmaker can't say, but the organizer can, which is that Dr. Money, what? Okay. Yeah. We're all learning something today.
Yes.
Dr. Money is gone, but we have an enemy today, just like Dr. Money. His name is Dix Pappas, D-I-X Pappas, which you hear a little bit about in the film. And he is currently the head of pediatric urology at Weill Cornell, just a couple blocks uptown. And not only is he still in power, but what he has done is so egregious and physically violent that I'm not going to go into that.
Yeah, but you could Google it. That story actually gets darker than we decided to go through deeply in the film. But
and there has not been a reckoning for him, and nor has there been a formal expose. So Dr. Money is gone, but this is very, very much still happening.
Yeah, I was just wondering how long you were working on this project. How long do you get to spend with this community?
Yeah, so it's kind of documentaries happen in pieces. From the very first seed of the idea to the time the film came out was 5 years. But during those 5 years, I also worked on a number of other films. The first really 3 or so years of that was sort of researching it, developing it, trying to figure out what to do, figuring out who might fund it, etc. So the actual filmmaking, from starting to film to the movie being completed, was just a little under 2 years. I like all processes to be kind of simultaneous. The filming, the editing, we start editing pretty early in the process. So I spent a lot of time during that period. I think from the time we started filming to the time we ended filming was about a year and a half. So I did get the great opportunity to spend quite a bit of time over a period of time with our 3 stars. Hence the some to the frequent changes of fashion, hairstyle, etc.
Okay, well, everyone, you made queer history. Thank you so much for coming. And a big round of applause for Julie.